Good afternoon, my dear brethren and sisters and friends. As our brother Grant just mentioned, this afternoon I'm talking on, have you ever witnessed a miracle? Watch Israel. It's an interesting topic and one that could lead us in many different directions. But my plan for this afternoon is to go through some of the history of the nation of Israel and see if there are any recorded events that could be classed as miracles. We'll then turn to the current nation of Israel and see what is recorded there in the way of miracles that have been done in the last 100 years or so. And finally, we'll turn to the future of Israel, where we'll explore what miracles the Bible says may happen in the future to Israel, and as we have read in that opening reading, how that relates to Revelation 21. I've set out this afternoon in a logical format. If we know what a miracle is, and have seen things in the past and present that meet the definition, then it's easy for us to understand how miracles could appear in the future. So, what's a miracle? If you look up in the dictionary, it will say, a miracle is an extraordinary and welcome event that is not explicable by natural or scientific laws and is therefore attributed to a divine agency. While I agree with the definition, many of the historical examples I've used today can also be proved by more than one source. So let's expand on the definition of a miracle. The expansion of the definition could be a remarkable event or development that brings very welcome consequences. For instance, if you saw a reporter asking some people that had been gathered around after a crash or something like that, they could say something like, it was a miracle, more people weren't injured. So using that as our basis of a definition, we can see that nearly every day of our lives, we are surrounded by miracles. There's the miracle of birth. Looking a little bit broader than the miracle of birth, what about the miracle of the wonder of creation? The creation of the sun and the moon by God has enabled all of the other biblical miracles and all other miracles to happen. And creation is the first miracle recorded in the Bible. It says in Hebrews that by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command. And we shouldn't think that it's only during Bible times, either the Old or the New Testament, at which God performed miracles. God has done and continues to perform miracles every day for us and for the nation of Israel. I'm sure in each of our lives we've experienced some sort of event that we just couldn't explain. Mine relates to some protection I received while driving one night. I don't need to go into detail, but I can't explain how I got out of the situation that I found myself in. I believe the angel of the Lord put his hands around me and protected me, my own personal miracle. Other small miracles that we may have heard about may include the miracle of Vesna Vukovic, who was a flight attendant. There was an explosion on her plane, and she was the only survivor, having fallen over 33,000 feet without a parachute. In another talk I've spoken about was about a lady who lifted a car off one of her children after an accident. There are people who have dodged certain death or escaped a natural disaster without scratch. That could be a miracle. How many times over the last few weeks, since the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, have we heard about miracles of survival? The list of unexplained or coincidental happenings is huge. But we're not here this afternoon to talk generalities. We're here to review some miraculous Bible events and see how we can learn lessons from those events to look deeper into Scripture and see what future miracles may lie ahead for us and for the nation of Israel. Just like today, miracles probably happened every day in the Old Testament as well. We just don't seem to have too many accounts of them. The Old Testament is from a period of history known as prehistory, and that's the period before written texts were kept of events. The only real form of record keeping from that age was verbal. Mothers told daughters and fathers told sons the stories of the events of the day. So it's likely that many miracles that did occur have just been lost through the passage of time. However, the fact that there are so many miracles recorded in the Bible relating to the children of Israel must be a miracle in itself. So without photographic or written evidence, it is easy to think that miracles and wonders didn't happen very often. If we read Psalm 77, it says, "I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old." Wonders of old. That could be translated miracles that have happened from olden times. That verse in Psalm 77 was written about 1000 BC, so there had already been 3000 years of human history since creation. And as I said earlier, we can see that creation continues to reveal God's miraculous work to mankind. Many of the wonders that are recorded in the Bible can be supported by scientific or archaeological proof. Most civilizations have a record of a flood event happening. The Bible account shows that God had become angry with the way man had turned their back on him. They were starting to do things for their own and not follow his laws. They didn't listen to Noah, who was trying to tell them to stop being wicked. So God sent a punishment. No rain had ever been recorded previously, yet the rains came and flooded the whole earth, killing all of the inhabitants except Noah and his extended family. While the rain was one of the miracles of the story, the more intriguing miracle for me was the way that Noah was actually saved. He built the ark, but for it to be seaworthy, the door needed to be closed from the outside, just as they do in planes today. But there was no one outside who assisted Noah, for all his friends, neighbours and other family were all off doing things on their own. So God shut the door. What a powerful symbol for those on board, and truly a miracle. Another miraculous event recorded in the Old Testament occurred when Pharaoh was holding captive the nation of Israel. A number of plagues fell upon Pharaoh and his subjects so that they would release the nation. The last of these plagues was the death of the firstborn of every house in one night. Pharaoh realised that the Israelites had a God looking after them that he couldn't compete with, so he let them go. Unfortunately, after a short period of time, Pharaoh and his senior leaders realised that there was no one left in the land to do all the menial and hard tasks. So he sent out his troops to recapture the Israelites. Trapped between the sea and the chasing troops, the Israelites had nowhere to go. Miraculously, though, the sea parted with Moses' help, and they escaped into it. The soldiers chased the Israelites into the sea. The Israelites got out of the sea, and then the sea went back to being normal and killing all of the soldiers chasing. Another miracle in the Old Testament is recorded in the book of Joshua. It tells the story of how soon after Joshua and the Israelites had entered into the Promised Land, they entered into a battle against 5 armies that had laid siege to the Gibeonites. Joshua had promised to protect the Gibeonites, so he led an army to fight the 5 kings that were fighting the Gibeonites. Joshua prayed for God's help. To do this, Joshua needed the sun to stay up so the armies he was fighting couldn't get food, replenishments, and be able to regroup overnight. The Bible record shows, "Then Joshua spoke to the Lord on the day when the Lord delivered the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, 'Sun, stand still upon Gibeon.' What a miracle. The sun stood still." I could go on, as there are dozens of more miracles recorded in the Old Testament, but unfortunately time doesn't permit. One last series of miracles from the ancient past I would like to mention are the miracles performed by Jesus. No talk on miracles would be complete without examining Jesus and the miracles he performed. Again, time's going to beat us, and there are too many miracles to draw examples from. there are over 40, and to go into detail, we would surely use up all of our time. But the 40 can be split into a number of categories. They are cures, healings, resurrections from the dead, and control over nature. Who can deny that turning water into wine isn't a miracle? Well, if that isn't, what about raising not one, but 3 people from the dead, one of them being one of your friends? True miracles indeed. But let's move away from ancient times and move more to our lifetime. The greatest miracle I see for the nation of Israel in our lifetime is the fact that the nation exists at all. From about 700 BC, the original nation of Israel had ceased to exist. While the Jewish people and the cities developed there still exist, Israel was now just part of many bigger empires, kingdoms, and territories. From the early 16th century until the First World War, Israel was part of the Ottoman Empire. In the 19th century, European powers struggled for influence in the area, usually on the premise that they were providing protection over Christian churches and holy places. While the Jews from the old nation of Israel lived there, the Christians had dominated them and their beliefs for nearly 2,000 years. However, in 1917 and following the First World War, Great Britain took control of Jerusalem as part of the Mandate of Palestine. However, the Arab and Jewish communities in Palestine were still in mortal combat, and Britain sought United Nations assistance to resolve the dispute. For another 30 years and another world war, the people of the area were still in battle with each other, Jews, Christians, and Arabs. But in November 1947, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the United Nations Petition Plan for Palestine, which called for the partition of Palestine into Arab and Jewish states. Then, in May 1948, the Jewish community in Palestine issued the declaration of the establishment of the State of Israel. The nation of Israel was born again. For a group, small in number, to win a battle over majority must surely have been a miracle. So why is that important to us? As Christadelphians, we believe that Christ will return to the earth and set up his kingdom that will last forever. We believe that the kingdom is a literal and physical kingdom and will be in current-day Israel, with Jerusalem as its capital. What we have spoken about so far shows how God has been in control of Israel's fortunes to date, and will control their fortunes into the future when he brings back his Son to establish his kingdom on earth. Is 2023 the year to see it? All signs indicate that it could very well be, for everything is in place. Previous generations have thought that Jesus Christ would return in their lifetimes. Indeed, the Bible has been designed to provide every generation with hope. Many Bible students today think that Christ's return is imminent. Certainly, the Bible contains some prophecies that could not have been fulfilled until this current generation. Shortly before his crucifixion and resurrection, Jesus Christ was asked by his disciples, "Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Jesus responded with a description of the conditions and events that would lead up to his second coming. Moreover, he said that when these signs became evident, his return would occur within one generation. Matthew 24 says, "Assuredly, I say to you, this generation will by no means pass away till all these things take place." Throughout the nearly 2,000 years since Christ gave this prophecy, many have thought that their generation was the time of his return. But with the aid of hindsight, we can see that there are a number of prophecies in the Bible that could not be fulfilled until our modern era, the post-World War II period. A few verses earlier in Matthew 24, we see that if Jesus does not intervene in world events soon, the human race will have their days shortened. I don't believe that this means that we'll become extinct. I do believe, however, that there will be a miracle that will stop the downward spiral and degradation of our values. We see all around us escalating conflicts between neighbouring countries. At present, it's hard to not pick up the news and see something about the Ukraine and Russia embroiled in war. We also know that the Saudis and Yemenis are disputing part of their border. There's also civil war in Burma and several civil wars and border disputes in Africa. And of course, there's the ongoing tension between Israel and Palestine. The good news in all of this is that the miracle will be the return of Jesus Christ to intervene and save mankind from annihilation. This prophecy or miracle could not have been fulfilled until man had the potential to wipe itself out through the creation of weapons of mass destruction. Only in the last 50 years has it become possible with the invention of nuclear weapons, space travel, and GPS. And what else has happened in that recent time? Well, that new nation of Israel has been re-established. Coincidence, miracle, or God's work at hand? Luke 21 is a parallel chapter to Matthew 24, which we were just reading, and says, "Teacher, when will these things be? And what sign will there be when these things are about to take place?" In response, Jesus showed that Israel would be the central focus of the political and military upheavals that would occur immediately before his return. Verses 20 to 22 read, "But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. For these are the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled." Anyone living a century ago would have found these words nearly impossible to comprehend. As I mentioned, Jerusalem has been fought over countless times, but for 4 centuries from 1517, the city had been at peace within the boundaries of the Ottoman Empire. Jews lived there as a minority under Turkish rule, but this changed dramatically during the course of the 20th century and ultimately led to the establishment of Israel in 1948, as I mentioned. The Old Testament prophet Zechariah lived and prophesied more than 500 years before Christ's birth. Yet his prophetic book tells us a great deal about the world we live in today. In Zechariah 12 it reads, "Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burdens themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it." In verse 9, Zechariah adds, "It shall be in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem." Let's just pause there and think about Israel's current position in world affairs. It's a nation of 9 million people, surrounded by over 200 million Arabs. The nation's capital is a holy site for both Christians and Muslims. So it's easy to understand that the majority of Western civilization, Christians, and Eastern civilization, Arabs, don't like this small nation being occupier of their sacred lands. So when we refer to the words of Zechariah, you can see that in these end times, the existence of Israel and the occupation of Jerusalem by the Jews cause anger and angst to others, as it has done over the centuries. However, Zechariah chapter 14 makes it clear that the words of the previous chapters are talking about the future, not past events. The time setting is therefore immediately before Christ's return. "Behold, the day of the Lord is coming, for I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. The city shall be taken, the houses rifled, and the women ravished. Half the city shall go into captivity. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. This is surely a miracle to come." Let's now look at another miracle that we believe will happen in Israel's future. This time we'll turn to the book of Daniel. In this book we find an amazing prophecy about two leaders, the kings of the north and the king of the south, the heads of regions that were geographically north and south of Israel. The chapter contains a long and detailed prophecy about the conflicts between these two powers. Of great significance is that whenever these two powers went to battle, the Jews, those in Israel, got trampled on. This was to continue from the time of Alexander until the middle of the 2nd century BC, a period of almost 200 years. Time does not allow us to go into great depth as to the identities of the countries involved, but I'll leave that for your study afterwards. We'll jump down to latter verses in that prophecy which talk about the end time, much like we were talking about the end times when referencing Zechariah. This verse reads, "At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter the countries, overwhelm them, and pass through. He shall also enter the glorious land, Israel, or the Holy Land, and many countries shall be overthrown." The latter part of Daniel's prophecy of this north-south conflict describes a clash of civilizations. There is a leader of a soon-coming European superpower, which is a revived Roman Empire, and a leader from a united Islamic world. Also contained in the book of Daniel, we see prophecies or future miracles about 4 great Western empires that would arise in the period between the time of his writings and the establishment of the kingdom of God on earth. This chapter speaks about the 10 horns which represent the several divisions into which the Roman Empire had divided. It also refers to governments and religions. Previous attempts to forge a united European empire from Justinian in the 6th century through Charlemagne, Napoleon, Mussolini, and Hitler all involved force and ultimately failed. Only now is this European superpower able to exist for the prophecy to be fulfilled. And why only now? Well, in 1957, the Treaty of Rome was signed by 6 European nations that formed the European Economic Community. Today, the EEC has grown into the European Union with 27 member nations. Out of these will possibly come the 10 nations or 10 leaders that form the final development of this new empire that Daniel spoke about. It wasn't until the 10th nation, Greece, was admitted to the EU in 1981 that any conceivable fulfilment of this prophecy or future miracle as written in the Bible was possible. It's both sobering and encouraging to think that we appear to be living in the generation that will ultimately witness the most important miracle in the history of mankind. As Jesus Christ tells his followers in Luke, "And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh." Moving to the final miracle that affects Israel, this one is more a visible and physical miracle. I draw your attention to a number of verses that talk about a future earthquake. Ezekiel 38 says, "For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath have I spoken. Surely in that day there shall be a great shaking in the land of Israel." Zechariah 14, which we had up previously, also mentions an earthquake. And if we look in Revelation 16, it says, "And there were voices and thunders and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great." We have all heard that there have been a couple of devastating earthquakes in Turkey and Syria over the last few weeks. These quakes have caused massive destruction of infrastructure and seen significant loss of life. Yet the example from those Bible verses shows how much worse this future earthquake is going to be. This future earthquake will affect the entire world in different ways to what we see when quakes hit today. Jerusalem is situated on the southern spur of a plateau in the Jordanian mountains, which includes the Mount of Olives to the east and Mount Scorpus to the northeast. Its elevation is just over 700 metres, and the whole of Jerusalem is surrounded by valleys and dry riverbeds. The topography of the whole region is going to be changed after this earthquake. This prophesied earthquake will alter the whole contour of the Middle East. If you know anything about earthquakes, you'll know that they happen around the edge of giant plates that form the crust of the earth. These are an area of the world that are prone to quakes because they sit on the edge of these plates. Israel, however, sits in the middle of a small plate that has never moved. Mount Zion, the site of Jerusalem, will be lifted up to dominate the land, whilst the countryside around Jerusalem will be depressed into a plain when this future quake occurs. I would like to conclude my talk this afternoon with these thoughts. Israel and its people have been the beneficiary of miracles from God since the beginning of time. The reason is that it's the land that God has chosen for his people to live in. Hopefully I've shown you that some of the miracles in the past that we have discussed show how God is in control of this. He helped Noah in the flood. He helped Joshua in the battle. He helped his own son Jesus do miracles so that we could all see his power and that he was the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies. God worked his power through men so that there was a reforming of his nation Israel. And God will make miracles happen in the future so that everyone will see that he is the God of all.